everybody. I am Sapna Mahadevan, your host for this evening here, and I welcome all of you to PSTV Live. So, today, here we are again with another genre that we are going to explore in story writing and understand the nuances, the different tips and techniques on how you can be writing a story all by yourself. And let me tell you that today, the genre is really exciting. It is something which is going to fascinate you and captivate your attention, right? So let me get going with our episode here and tell you more about it. Here we are with our fiction story writing masterclass. And as always, we need to unleash the writer in us and try and stir up that, whisk up that creativity, yes, in order to write a story of today's genre. These have become more and more popular in history and in the coming times. And a retelling of these stories are popular as ever before, yes. So I want you all to guess what I am talking about here. Maybe if I tell you these stories are about rags to riches, beasts to beanstalks, and these are stories that shape our happily ever afters. Have you already understood what I am talking about? Let me know in the chat box here if you already know what this genre is all about. It is about a prince charming and a beautiful princess somewhere, about the kingdom, the royal opulence, and of course a lot of insights that they give little children. Yes. So great there. Yes, that is right. It is, we are talking about fairy tales. We are of course talking about folk tales, and these can also be dubbed as magic tales or wonder tales, right? And these are very popular these days, actually have been popular since long back, right? We have all heard fairy tale stories during bedtime, and we all love to watch its depiction in a movie, maybe, right? So it excites us to no end to watch or probably read a fairy tale story where suddenly, the problem statement intensifies, but finally we do get a resolution, a positive outcome, right? So yes, we are going to see how we can be writing a story, that to a fairy tale, all by ourselves in today's episode. And let me show you all of the coming up segments here. So the plethora of activities that we have curated for our wonderful viewers right there on the screen. We have essentials, some tips on how we can be thinking about essentials for the fairy tale genre. Then, of course, the plot building pointers, how you can make your story more and more interesting, and a page turning compulsion for your audiences. And apart from all of this serious stuff here, we also have a lot of fun stuff. So we will be coming up with a crossword segment. There is guess the movie, and of course it's all going to be about the fairy tale theme, right? There is a recommendation of the day today. Also, there are synonymous words which will help you with your vocabulary. And as always, we have icebreaker questions, which are really wanting you to put on your thinking caps and give me some amusing answers in the chat box there. Yes. So as always, the chat box is welcome and open here for your comments and suggestions and any thoughts that you would want to share with me, right? And I am all ears, waiting for your comments here in the chat box, and let's have a conversation. Yes. So let me move ahead into my first icebreaker question for the day. There it is. What is your favorite web series? That's the question that we have, the first one in today's episode. And do let me know what is that popular web series that you love watching. Yes. And you can be letting me know on the name, or which is the channel that you watch it in. And I would be more than glad to see what all interests you, right? So yes, do let me know. I'm getting Jurassic Park there. Okay. So something like Jurassic Park. Okay. So maybe it is about dinosaurs, is it? Okay. What else? Fast and Furious. Okay. So I understand from that name there, it is some kind of a racy web series that you're seeing. Yes. Okay. And then what else? We have Dragon Prince come up there. Great. So again, fantasy, more and more of fantasy, right? Um, Lovely. So some cartoon shows as well coming up there in my chat box. And okay, I'll give that to you if that is what is your most favorite. Great cartoon shows as well featuring here in my chat box. And yes, so thanks again for all of those web series recommendations that you've given here in the chat box. And great to know all of your options here. Lovely. And a lot of hello messages there. Hi, Vani Shri. Thanks for your comment. Um, I do come live every day at 6 p.m. India time. And yes, today's episode is all about fairy tale and how you can be writing one yourself. Um, Great. So let's move ahead into our segment here. We have the next golden question, which is what's the genre? And we already know, since we are talking about fairy tale, and since this is a Monday evening, we have fantasy as our selected genre for today, right? And let me tell you that fantasy, again, is a piece of fiction, something that stems up from the author's imagination. It is all made up, and it is totally based on your imaginative abilities, right? And whatever happens in a fairy tale is kind of like outwardly, and it cannot really happen in a real world situation, right? So these events, these characters, they may have some magical abilities, some superpowers that you cannot actually see in a real world scenario. And that is why the power of magic, you can see in all of these fairy tale stories, right? And that's why it is so very fascinating. And we all love fairy tales, right? The happily ever after. Yes. So that's the fantasy genre that we are looking out for today. And let me also tell you what the subgenre of the day is, which is fairy tale. So that means that today we are going to explore the genre of fairy tale fantasy, right? And it is distinguished from other subgenres of fantasy by usage of heavy motifs and often plots from folklore, even. Yes. And magic is something that is prevalent here in a fairy tale story. You can always see a magic wand, maybe, or a fairy godmother who grants you your wishes, right? So all of these stories come under this particular subcategory of fairy tale fantasy, right? Now let's move ahead and understand what our next segment for today is. And yes, here we go with our next icebreaker question. And the question is, what is your favorite hiding spot in your house? So do let me know which is your favorite hiding spot and why do you go and hide there, maybe. Yes, are you trying to run away from some vegetables that mama is wanting to or asking you to eat? Or are you playing hide and seek at home with your siblings, maybe? Or are you escaping studies? What is it? Why do you go and hide there in your favorite spot? And which is that spot is the question coming up next. So do let me know in the chat box here. um, Under the bed is what Dafia tells me. Okay, so that's one favorite hiding spot, isn't it? Under the bed. We all crawl up under the bed. I have done that many a times when I was a kid. Yes. So under the bed is one of the answers there. And my kids, let me tell you, they can be found very easily behind the curtain. Yes. And I don't know, even when they know that I probably would already understand that they are there, it still has become a habit. And my younger one, he definitely is always found behind the curtain, right? It's so funny, isn't it? Kids and their innocence, right? Okay, so let me tell let me know more on your hiding spots around house in the chat box here. There are smileys coming up there, and under the bed is the option that I can see here. Okay, and great, Pratyuksha. I am doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, so you can keep writing to me in the chat box there. And I'll be waiting for all of your answers. And yes, thanks a lot for all of those hello messages. A very warm welcome to all of you to today's episode here. And today's episode is really exciting because of the genre that we are looking out for. Yes, it is fairy tale fantasy, and it is something that we all have a liking towards, right? a fascinating subject. Yes, so let's move ahead into our next segment. We are going to talk about all of the essential elements that we need to think through before we start writing a fairy tale, right? So, what are the three definite elements that we would want to consider while we are writing a fairy tale story? I'm going to show you all of those three elements there, quintessential elements rather. Here they are. We have the characters, as always, the backbone of the story, and then, of course, what is a fairy tale without a magical setting, isn't it? So, we are going to have a lot of magic happening in our stories, right? And we need to be imaginative at best, try to think about all the magic that we can be including into our story. And magic is one thing which makes the fairy tale story more and more interesting, right? So, magic it is, that is the second essential element. And of course, we're all looking out for happy endings. Yes, fairy tales are always synonymous with happily ever afters, right? We always want our stories to end positively, in a good note, in a happy ending. The prince always finds his princess, right? And they always get to stay together. Yes, so that's the happy ending that we want for our story here, and we will be looking out for all of these elements in more greater detail. So let me tell you what comes next. We have the characters here. So, yes, for the characters, let me tell you that you would have always seen in fairy tales, maybe from a walking, talking cat clad in a remarkably stylish footwear, to maybe an exiled princess who likes to hang out with her band of vertically challenged pals. Or there are umpteen choices that you can have for a fairy tale. Yes, we have so many fairy tales that are our favorites. Maybe if I can list down some of them, then Cinderella, of course, is one of them, right? Glass slippers are something that are our favorites with that Cinderella story, of course. And then we have the famous dialogue in our famous story, which is mirror mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all. Yes, so that's again synonymous with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? There's Hansel and Gretel. There are so many fairy tales that we love and enjoy watching and reading. Yes, so think about all of those characters, those special unique characters that we have in a fairy tale, and there is little room for subtlety here. That means that everything is really loud and pompous in a fairy tale. There is nothing that is subtle. So, yes, that is one of the aspects that we always want to remember. And as mentioned, these stories are designed for children, and children tend to see the world in black and white. They do not understand the gray area or something which is in between black and white. So, morality is something which has to be really distinguished very clearly between black and white, right? So the character is either evil or they are good characters. They are, maybe occasionally you can have a neutral character which does not partake in any of these, stigmas here of good and evil. But royalty is also another frequently talked about subject in a fairy tale. We always see that the setting most usually is of a kingdom somewhere far far away, and we talk about the prince and the princesses, and they of course are living in a royal mansion someplace which is full of opulence and royalty. So that's also one of the aspects that we would be thinking through in our story. And then, much like the tabloids obsession with the celebrity gossip, similarly is the case of fairy tales, where often there are kings and queens and beautiful princesses, charming handsome princes, right? So all of these are going to be the characters for our story. So if I want to summarize that, then there could be a charming prince, there could be a beautiful princess, there could be a mansion that we are talking about, maybe a king and a queen, and all of the royal palace guards that we have, that we usually see in a fairy tale, right? So all of these are the characters in our story that we want to go ahead with. Occasionally we also see evil characters where they are maybe stepmothers or stepsisters, and someone who is actually causing a hurdle into the path of our lead characters here, right? So these are one of the essentials there, the characters. And now, after the characters, let's move ahead to what the magical setting may be. Yes. So, magic again, you can see it in various forms in a fairy tale story. And these are all again fanciful cast of maybe giants, witches, and dwarfs, and there could be talking animals. But it is not only the cast that is magical, there can often be the setting itself which is magical, right? So, like, if we want to think about it as an example, then in Hansel and Gretel, we had a house full of chocolates, right? A house made of chocolates and gingerbreads, yes? So that was magical in itself. We have in Cinderella, we have seen how there is a fairy godmother with her magical wand, and she just whooshes everything up. And we know what happens next, isn't it? Cinderella has a pretty carriage with horse-drawn carriages there, a beautiful dress, a gown that she has for herself, and she's all made up, all ready for the ball, right? So that's how fairy tales frequently represent coming together of the human world. There are mythical creatures. There is also a talk about the animal world, and it is not only in the realm of magic that this is possible. The normal rules of physics that we abide by in our normal humdrum world, even that everyday reality, that no longer applies in a fairy tale. Yes. So fairy tales are no place for dry reporting. Students can create their own fairy tale. They may delve deep into the realm of possibilities, into what they can have as a wild imagination, what they dream of, probably, right? And all of these things that cannot come true in a real world setup can, of course, be written about in your own story. Yes. So that's what magical settings are all about. And a fairy tale, of course, has a lot of magical settings. Yes. Now, let me talk about the happy endings as well. So, as I always tell you, a fairy tale is all about the happily ever afters, right? So, like any well constructed story, fairy tales also have a climax and a resolution. However, generally they are not tragic. We most usually have an ending which is on a positive note. There is what we call as the formula for a success fairy tale story, right? And this is where the conclusion, we visit the magical realm and all of them get to live happily ever after. Yes. So that's what we want for our fairy tale ending. Whatever is the problem statement, although it keeps intensifying, but it definitely gets a resolution at the end, which is a positive one. Yes. So we always want to seek for a happy ending into our fairy tale story. That is the third essential element, right? So now we have seen all of those three elements there. We talked about the characters, we saw what a magical setting we can have, and of course, while we are talking about this magical setting, we want vivid description for our audiences to just visualize all of that we have in our story. Yes. And apart from that, the third element, of course, is a happy ending to the story. Yes. Now let's move ahead into our first synonymous word for today, which is humdrum. So, what humdrum means, or what is its various synonyms are, it could be interchangeably used with dull, boring, and even tiresome, right? That's the meaning for the word humdrum: dull, boring, or tiresome. And now let's move ahead into our next segment, which is the expert tips on establishing the essentials, right? So after all of those essentials there, let's look at two of our expert tips for today on how you can be writing an essential with more clarity. Yes. So the first expert tip here is, whatever is the challenge or the hurdle, obstacle that your heroes face, it must be something which is impossible to overcome, or impossible is a stronger word. I can say that it must be something which is really difficult to overcome, and it is not something that can be easily gotten rid of, right? So there has to be a magical character who's going to help the hero with solving that particular problem there, and that is how all of those magic gets to take shape in our story, right? So, for example, only true love could break the beast's curse in Beauty and the Beast. Yes, so that's another beautiful example there with the popular story of Beauty and the Beast. Yes, now all of these challenges and hurdles, when you're going to think about writing them into your story, then see to it that these are all something which is difficult to handle, and without magical powers or special abilities, the hero cannot break the spell. Yes, that's the first expert tip. And now for the second expert tip, since your target audience is going to be young children, I would suggest that you would want to keep it simple, keep the language simple, use a language that is good for all age groups and is easily comprehensible, easily understandable, and try and avoid the usage of long sentences. Yes, now include words like maybe once upon a time and happily ever after, because it of course gives us the charm of a fairy tale, right? Now send your hero into a journey, into a conquest somewhere which is adventurous. You can be doing that because that's again going to create a lot of challenges and something which is going to be fascinating for your audiences. And also let me tell you that common fairy tales, they follow the good versus evil story, and villains or evil characters are punished for their acts and the hero is rewarded in some way or the other. Yes, that's how we see the sequence of events happening in our fairy tales, right? Now with that expert tip there, let's move ahead to the next synonymous word, which is obstacle. Sorry, I think there was a technical glitch there. Okay, so yes, I think I am back now and you are able to hear me clearly. Please do let me know in the chat box here if everything's well. And yes, so now you can see the synonymous word that we have next into our episode here, which is obstacle. And the similar word meanings or synonyms for obstacle would be barrier, hurdle, and even complication, right? So jot down all of these words in your Google It journal, and you can use them wherever appropriate. Keep revisiting all of these words that you have written or jotted down in your in one place, whichever whatever name you have for your journal, right? And revisiting them is really going to help you with your vocabulary, and you can of course learn all of these new words and try using them into your everyday usage wherever applicable, right? So that's the synonymous word, the next one that we have for today, which is obstacle, which means barrier, hurdle, or even complication. Yes, now let's move ahead into our next segment, which is the movie title trivia. And here we have um, I'm going to show you some pictures here onto my screen. You need to put on your thinking caps and try giving me the names of these popular movie titles. And let me tell you, these are all popular fantasy movie titles. So try guessing the name and writing it down here in the chat box. Yes. So let me move ahead with my first picture for the day. There we have it onto my screen. Yes, so that's such a popular one. We can see one of those USPs of that movie there on the screen, the long hair that our lead character has. Yes, so do let me know in the chat box what is the name of this movie that you see on the screen here. Yes, I'm going to give you some time to type out your answers, and let me see who gives me that correct answer there. Um, Of course, yes, that is correct. Dafia, Vani Shri, thanks a lot for all of those answers. It is Tangled, of course. And let's move ahead into our next movie title here. There it is. There is the next picture. And yes, again, another popular one. And you can see all of those magical characters, magical elements there on my screen. Yes, and that's what it is about a fairy tale fantasy, isn't it? Disney's very popular movie there. Do let me know the name of that movie. And that's that is great. It is my favorite. Yes, it is everyone's favorite, right? Beauty and the Beast. That is there, the movie title that you have correctly guessed. And a lot of fairy tale fantasy elements that we can see in all of these movies. Yes. And of course, while you're trying to write your own story, it is going to be something that you have always dreamt of, possibly. But you can, of course, take inspiration from all of these movies, the magical elements, the characters, and you know how larger than life all of these characters are. These are some things that we can imbibe from these movies here. And let me now move ahead into our next picture. There it is. Yes, so we all know what movie that is, isn't it? What's the name of this movie here? A popular story that we have also covered in one of our Saturday special episodes. And yes, those are all correct answers. Thanks a lot for that. It is Cinderella. Cinderella. And let's move ahead. We have two more questions remaining in this segment here. So here is the next one. And that is the cat that we were talking about in the starting of our episode, right? That is correct. Yes, it is, of course, the adventures of a cat in a boot. Yes, that rhymes, isn't it? Great. So, with that movie there, let's move ahead to the next one. Here we have the next picture. Yes, there it is. Another one of our favorite fairy tale movies. Correct, that is right. The Little Mermaid. Yes. With that, I also remember Nemo. That was another fantastic character and a lovely movie that we had. Yes. So this is The Little Mermaid. That is correct. And again, a lot of magical characters in this movie as well. Yes. So some popular fairy tale movies and stories that we have revisited with this movie title trivia here. Great. And let's move ahead now into our next segment, which is the plotting the plot, right? So here again, we are going to discuss three important plot building pointers that we need to focus on and invest some time on while we write our own story. So maybe you can think of all of these elements beforehand. We have the conflict, that is the problem statement. And of course, the problem statement is something which is going to keep on intensifying throughout the story before we get to a resolution, right? So the resolution, again, is one of the important elements here. And finally, we have a loud and clear moral lesson, some kind of an insight, a wise saying, or probably some wisdom that we have for our audiences there. Yes, always in a fairy tale, we do have a moral or a lesson that we want to give out to our audiences. And you can maybe try working the other way around as well. Think of a moral that you would want to imbibe from your story, and then probably you can craft a tale around that moral, right? So that's again another way of going about writing a story here. But all of these three elements are imperative to a fairy tale. We have the conflict, the resolution, and the moral lesson. So let me delve deeper into each one of them. So what we can think of as a conflict is something which is a challenge to your hero or your heroine, and they need to solve this particular challenge. They need to unravel that particular mystery. The bigger the conflict, the better it gets. And the key to a good conflict in a fairy tale is to make the conflict feel near to impossible to solve without some special ability or without some special magical powers, right? Until the last moment, your protagonist where your protagonist comes out victorious in the final ending. Until that key moment, we need to build up to the suspense of that particular conflict, and we need to portray that conflict as something which is nearly impossible to solve, right? Only then your stakes are getting higher, your problem is intensifying all throughout the story, and only then your audience is already onto the edge of their seats wanting to know what's going to happen next. Yes, and there is an involvement of all of those magical powers which brings that particular conflict to resolution. Yes, so that's about how important a conflict is to a fairy tale story. And then finally, what is the resolution? How do we decide on how we are going to end the story? We need to, of course, keep it dramatic towards the end. And children or students who are going to try attempting to write a fairy tale all by yourself, you will need to think about how the two main opposing forces, they resolve their differences, right? In the villain of the piece, has the villain vanquished in the battle? Do they have a change of heart and they see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or the moral lesson of the story is designed to maybe communicate what the apparent story's conclusion is. Yes, so this, all of these elements together, tied together, form the resolution of our story, and somehow we have a happily ever after, right? Maybe like you see in Cinderella, the magical wand and the fairy godmother, they make it possible for Cinderella to overcome all of those hurdles and go to that ball. And finally, it so happens that Cinderella becomes the cynosure of all eyes in that ball there. She gets noticed by the Prince Charming, and again, the problem intensifies because the clock has struck 12 and she has to run back to her place without being revealed. Yes. And but again, after that problem getting resolved, there are high stakes here. The prince needs to find his princess, but finally we see how the plot is tied together, and how we see that there is a happy ending towards the climax, right? So the glass slipper somehow gets its perfect fit, and the story comes to a happy ending, right? So that's how we need to have a dramatic end towards the resolution. And we need to showcase in our conflict that the problem is intensifying all along, but still with all of those special magical powers, we get to a happy ever after, right? So that's the resolution. That's how you need to think for your fairy tale fantasy story. And now the third element is the moral lesson. Again, something which is very crucial to our story. And the reason why fairy tales are so popular because is all of the life lessons that they offer to their readers. Yes. So the most common lessons learned from the fairy tale is probably kind virtue can beat any evil in the world, and no matter who you are, dreams do come true. So that's something that we always have seen in a fairy tale, and it is always about hope and aspirations, and the will that we cling on to. Yes, so that's a moral lesson that you would want to put out with your story there. You can maybe have something which sticks with you and something which is special for you, which you can add as a moral lesson in your story, right? But this is again a crucial part that we want to spell out to our audiences. Yes, make it explicit in nature. And with that, we have seen how we can make our fairy tale story interesting and absorbing for our audiences. Yes, now let's move ahead and look at the next element, which is the synonymous word. And the word is vanquished, right? So the word vanquished has synonyms conquer, beat, and or bet, or that's the past tense, or even trounce, right? So these are the synonyms or the similar word meanings for vanquished. So have we conquered the territory? Have we bet the evil or the villain of our story? Have we vanquished them? That is the question that we need to ask towards the resolution of our story. Yes, so these are synonyms for the word vanquish. Do jot them down in your Google journal. Try googling up the meaning of all of these words, and use them in sentences and impress your audience. Yes, now let's move ahead into our next segment, which is the recommendation of the day. And there it is, Jack the Giant Slayer. That's the recommendation of the day movie for all of you. And again, it is full of fantasy. full of magical elements there. Yes, do watch that interesting movie. It is a recommendation from us to you. And with that, we come to the next element that we have here in our fairy tale fantasy story, and it is all about expert tips on how you can be plotting the plot. Yes, so the first expert tip that we have here is one of the hallmarks of all fairy tales, and that is a touch of magic, right? So it's not usually an organized system which is bound by rules. That's more the realm of traditional fantasy. But rather, you can think about a world where characters can possibly stumble upon a pair of seven league boots without questioning how they function, right? So you need to keep out your logical thinking aside here, and think about how you can include all of these magical elements that do not have an organized system of rules, right? So without asking too many questions, maybe you can give a bit of magic, a dash of magic to your audiences, and they are surely definitely going to love it. Yes, that's the first expert tip here. And the second expert tip, let me tell you that most fairy tales, they feature epic battles between the good and the evil, and the most common pairing being a noble prince or a princess versus a wicked witch or a wizard, right? Now, The Girl Who Drank the Moon is no exception, focusing on characters who are clearly defined as heroes or villains. So, always there is a black and a white, and there are neutral characters, but you cannot see a gray character in a fairy tale, right? So, either they are towards the virtuous side or they are towards the evil side, and we can clearly pick as to who is the hero here and who is the evil or the villain here, right? So that's again one expert tip, that you want to have a clear demarcation of your characters. And with all of these tips and all of these essential elements, the plot building pointers, I'm sure you've got a lot of information here on how you can be writing a fairy tale story by yourself. So think about putting a fairy tale story together. You can possibly think of all the dreams that you have, and that you can put into paper, weave it into a story, and let the world know of all of the magical, fascinating elements that you can possibly think of. Yes, so after all of these expert tips here, let's move ahead into our next segment. We again have a synonymous word, which is antagonist. And let me tell you, antagonist would mean an enemy or a villain, and the synonyms for the word are opponent, foe, and rival, right? So that's a three-letter word, FOE, foe, which also means enemy or antagonist. And yes, again, jot all of these words down, try remembering them so that you can use them in your vocabulary, right? And as I told you, the synonymous segment is again introduced into these episodes with the aim of amplifying your vocabulary, right? So, antagonist means opponent, foe, or rival. You can be using all of these words interchangeably. And with that, we have seen all of the synonymous words for today. And thanks a lot for that comment there, Richa. Glad to know that you had fun in today's episode. And before I end the broadcast, I have another fun segment for all of you wonderful people. And here is the next segment we are going to play out. It is a fun segment called Locate the Words. And here I'm going to show you a letter maze. And in the letter maze, you need to have an eagle's vision and try finding out all the hidden words which are related to today's episode. Yes. So here is the letter maze. Try finding out four words that are hidden in this particular letter maze. It could be written horizontally, vertically, or even diagonally. And try giving me the words in the chat box. Yes. So let me see who is the early bird here who gives me the first response. The clock is already ticking and you need to be quick. So I get the first word there, which is drama. Thanks a lot for that, Anshul. That's the right word. I can see we have drama here. I can give you that one. What else do we have here? Yes, castle is another word. So that could be the setting of our story. And yes, how can we forget the fairy, right? There it is. We have a fairy as well. And what else? Fairy comes up there again. We have castle, we have drama. And what else? I can see So many other words there. Mm, write to me in the chat box here what is the other word that you can find, which is also a correct answer. And that's, of course, something that we have seen in today's episode, right? So let me reveal all of the answers here. The first one, we have castle, and then we have magic. And okay, so there was magic as well, and there is fairy. And then what do we have next? We have witch here, and I can give you drama as well, right? So those were the words that we had in our episode for today. Mm, yes, so thanks a lot again for giving me all of those answers there. And now let me give you a quick roundup of all that we have learned in today's episode. At a Glance is the name of the segment. And here we have the first and foremost, we have the essentials. So, in our essentials, we are going to think about the characters, the the beautiful cast of our story who are going to give us all of that high pitched drama. And then what about the magical setting? Give clear descriptions of all the magic that you're going to have into your story. And then, of course, we are looking out for a happy ending, right? And for the plot building pointers, we saw how we can be talking about a particular conflict which is intensifying throughout. Then there is a moral lesson that we would want to give to our audiences. And of course, the climax or the ending will have a resolution that ties all of the loose ends together, and it is going to be a happy ending, right? So these are the plot building pointers here, and now I would definitely urge all of you to implement all the learnings from today's episode and try drafting your very first fairy tale fantasy story. And it is going to be fascinating to see how you can come up with a fairy tale story all by yourself. And it is a magic world altogether, right? So it's going to be really fun putting out that story together. Yes. So do attempt at writing your first fairy tale fantasy story. And with that, we come to the end of our episode for today. And I would meet you next tomorrow with another special genre in story writing. And yes, so I want all of you to take good care of yourselves, have a fun time, and keep smiling. Bye bye.